Now the latest ITV News in London with Duncan Golestani.
Tonight, the spiralling cost of the much criticised Marble Arch Mound. The price tag of the new tourist attraction has doubled to £6 million, forcing a council boss to resign.
People are really surprised to find that this mound behind me was built by a local authority. They think it must have been constructed by a mad billionaire or it's an entry for the Turner Prize.
Also ahead, 4 years of pain and counting. The family of a man being held in Iran protest on the anniversary of his detention. Walkies no more. Plans to limit the numbers of professional dog walkers on Hampstead Heath. And 3/4 of a century after they were last in top-flight football, Brentford FC finally play in the Premier League tonight. We're with a fan who's been supporting since the last time they played against the best.
We've been looking forward to this for a long, long time, you know. 74 years is quite a long wait, isn't it?
Good evening. It was intended to attract visitors back to the capital, a centrepiece in a city full of landmarks. But from the first day it opened, the Marble Arch Mound attracted attention for all the wrong reasons. And now the council has admitted the costs of the project have spiralled from £3 million up to £6 million. The deputy leader has resigned and a full investigation has been started into how it ended up spending so much for so little. Chloe Keedy reports.
The Marble Arch Mound was proving popular today. For this month, entry costs nothing. In stark contrast, it turns out that putting it here has now cost £6 million. That's almost double the original budget, and enough for the Conservative councillor who spearheaded the project to resign.
What's happened? Where has the money actually been spent?
Westminster's Labour councillors are calling for an independent review into what they are dubbing Moundgate.
People are really surprised to find that this mound behind me was built by a local authority. They think it must have been constructed by a mad billionaire or it's an entry for the Turner Prize. No, this is not the kind of thing local authorities should be doing.
There seem to be plenty of people here today. Is this not a good way to get people back to the West End?
Well, I think you should judge for yourself. It's free, so come on down.
It hasn't always been free. It opened last month and promptly closed again after paying ticket holders complained that it was still under construction. Today, visitors still weren't exactly convinced.
It's pretty bad. Yeah, I mean, you can't see anything.
Do you think it's worth £6 million?
No. If it attracts visitors to London, then yes, it is, because that's what we need.
Do you think it's worth a lot of money?
No.
No, condemned by a 5-year-old.
I decided there was only one thing for it. OK, I've made it to the top, so I'm just going to try and show you some of the views. So down here on my left, we've got quite a lot of trees. If you come around this way, over behind me in the distance there, you can see the Shard and the London Eye. But really the only uninterrupted view is of the Hard Rock Hotel. The Mound is part of a multi-million-pound regeneration meant to help West End businesses get back on their feet.
One of the things that we've got to recognise is that businesses in Oxford Street and Westminster contribute hugely to not just the local coffers but national coffers. That's why it's important to be supporting those businesses to thrive and flourish. Clearly though, this particular project has not gone as the council had planned. That's why it's important for lessons to be learned.
In a statement, Westminster Council said the Mound opened too early and we've apologised for that. It's become clear that costs have risen more than anticipated and that is totally unacceptable. We've also instigated a thorough internal review to understand what went wrong and ensure it never happens again. But the council insists that London's newest landmark will bring a buzz back to this area. You could argue it was already doing that today. Proof perhaps that there really is no such thing as bad publicity. Chloe Keedy, ITV News.
A retired engineer from South London has now spent 4 years in prison in Iran. Anusha Ashuri, who's 67, was arrested during a family visit in 2017. Earlier, his family staged an empty chair protest outside Downing Street, urging the Prime Minister to discuss his situation. On Twitter this afternoon, Boris Johnson said he reiterated his call for Iran to release him immediately. Ria Chatterjee has more.
This family describe hope as dangerous now. After 4 years without Anusha Ashuri, they understand that political manoeuvring comes at great personal cost.
You know, sleep terrors, constant headaches, not only for us, obviously for my dad as well. He's nearly 70 years old, and you know, the physical and emotional toll that he's having obviously bleeds into our lives.
Still, they keep the pressure on. An empty chair here to represent, they say, Boris Johnson's absence.
All the years that we have been campaigning, we have never received public or private acknowledgement of our case from the Prime Minister. And this is despite us demanding it every time we have meetings with the Foreign Office. So we have put together this protest to maybe ask him why is it that there is this resistance or reluctance to be involved with our case.
In 2017, Mr. Ashuri was in Tehran visiting family. Suddenly, he was arrested, charged with spying by the authorities, and given a 10-year prison sentence. Late this afternoon, Boris Johnson tweeted, "On the 4th anniversary, I reiterate my call for Iran to do the right thing and release him immediately."
We've never once heard the PM actually mention his name, even say Anusha Ashuri.
I'm also calling on the Prime Minister to extend diplomatic protection to Anusha so that the British government can pursue his release with the seriousness that this case deserves.
Nazanin Zaghari, Ratcliffe's husband, is here in solidarity. Nazanin has been detained in Iran for 5 years.
It's ironic because I've just met last week the Foreign Secretary and you know, he was very sincere and gave me an hour of his time. But they're also right. It's really easy and frequent to feel like, listen, our loved one is being held in prison for years, and what are you guys doing?
Sherry, last time I saw you, we were talking about the fact that COVID was spreading in the prison. Obviously, that's been an added stress for your husband. How is he?
At the moment, he's not too bad, but about 3 months ago, we are pretty certain he caught COVID.
They tell me their hope ebbs and flows, that Anusha Ashuri's absence is all-consuming. Ria Chatterjee, ITV News.
A 14-year-old boy has been charged with the murder of a father who was stabbed to death outside his home in East London. 45-year-old James Markham was attacked after allegedly trying to defend his daughter in Churchill Terrace in Chingford on Monday evening. A second boy, also 14, and a 16-year-old girl have been released under investigation. And a man who raped a teenage girl after he kidnapped her as she was walking to school in Merton has been jailed. Cadian Nelson has been sentenced to 20 years in prison. His attack in November last year was filmed by a member of the public on her phone and posted online, which provoked fierce public backlash. Earlier this week, we had the British sprinter CJ Ujah on with us talking about his joy at winning a silver medal at the Tokyo Olympics. That joy was short-lived. He's now been suspended from competition after testing positive for a banned substance. Well, Sam Holder is here with me now. So, Sam, what happened?
Well, Duncan, we've never seen British athletes have to hand back the medals they've won at the Summer Olympics before, but that is potentially what could happen next. And it's an anxious wait, not just for CJ Ujah, but the whole of his 4x100 metre team. Remember, they were so close to winning gold, missing out by just 100th of a second. CJ Ujah was the first one up in that final. And the 27-year-old has now been provisionally suspended after testing positive for 2 prohibited substances. One is called Ostarine and the other is called S23. Now, they're not technically anabolic steroids, but they're very similar to anabolic steroids, and they are completely banned in all circumstances. And in fact, they're considered not fit for human consumption. Now, as you mentioned, CJ Ujah was on the show on Tuesday. I think we'll be able to hear a clip from him, but remember, this was before the allegations were made public.
If I'm honest, because I'm on the first leg, so I'm on the top bend on the track, and for me, it looked like we got the gold, but I knew it was pretty tight. So then when I looked up at the board, I saw that Italy just about got it by 100th of a second. So obviously at the time we wanted to win, and it was heartbreaking, but we haven't got a medal in 16 years, so it's an amazing achievement for us and the team.
So he was speaking on Tuesday there. What's the process now, Sam?
Duncan, when samples are taken, one is immediately analysed and a second is frozen. Now, what CJ Ujah can do is request that frozen sample, called the B sample, is tested to see if there were any problems with the original testing. If there weren't, and he is found to have a banned substance in his system, then the World Anti-Doping Agency is very, very clear. Every single member of that relay team will be disqualified, will have to hand back their prize money and their silver medal.
OK, Sam, thank you. Next tonight, festivals are back, but with the return of mass events is perhaps inevitably the return of the darker side of big gigs. More than 40% of women under the age of 40 have experienced sexual harassment at a live music event. That's according to a new music industry initiative called Safe Spaces Now. It's being backed by big London names in the music world like Sophie Ellis-Bextor and Mabel, who has been performing already this summer. Well, Claire Barnett is the Executive Director of the UN Women UK, and she joins me live now. Hello, Claire. First of all, what kinds of harassment are women facing at gigs and events?
Thanks. I think that's a really important question, because I think we sometimes think that sexual harassment refers only maybe to catcalling and wolf whistling, which can be distressing, especially when they escalate into more serious physical violence. But actually, sexual harassment also includes a number of types of physical violence against women and girls, including quite serious violence such as rape. So we are talking about a spectrum of behaviours that are making women and girls not only feel, but really be unsafe at festivals and live music. And we think that's a real shame, because this reopening of live music should be a real opportunity for escapism and joy for all people.
What is it about music events that seems to lend itself to these such high numbers?
Well, to be clear, we know that women, girls and marginalised groups are being harassed across public spaces and in private. So it's not only music events, or it's not that music events have created this problem, but we do know that the music industry is frankly not doing enough so far to protect against them. And we've heard that it's because it's too difficult in somewhere like a nightclub environment or somewhere open air like a festival to track these incidents and change behaviour. But we've just seen from the COVID pandemic, that's a great example of how live music events, venues, tours and studios have had to change public and their own behaviour en masse in order to keep us safe. The return to live music now has lots of controls in place to keep people safe from COVID. So we know that it's possible to change behaviour if we care enough. And that's what this campaign is all about.
So what safety measures do you think can be put in place?
There's a few different types of thing here. So we've worked around the world collecting ideas for safety measures in different cities and public spaces for over a decade now. And we launched this project 2 years ago. And since then in the UK, we've worked with thousands of women and girls, particularly from underserved groups, to have the community design their own solutions that they know will work for them. And it ranges from things like logistical solutions, so better design of toilets, of exits, the great Ask for Angela scheme being followed up by knowing that once somebody leaves a festival or venue, there's someone looking out for them to make sure they're safe on their journey home. There's a lot of stuff about behavioural intervention, so how do we implement codes of conduct and educate people as bystanders so that they know how they can safely intervene if they see and witness unsafe behaviour. And then there's other things like training and education for security staff and bar staff, and better use of technology for reporting. So there's a whole spectrum of things from preventing this behaviour to acting as quickly as possible when it does happen. And of course, the emergency services are involved in that, but there's actually so much more that we can do as communities as well that we want to see.
Claire Barnett, thank you very much. Still to come on the programme, 74 years of waiting is nearly over for Brentford. They are back in top-flight football tonight and we're live at the stadium. Plus, who will walk all the lockdown dogs? Controversial plans to limit professional dog walkers on Hampstead Heath. But first, it's a month since the torrential rain battered the capital, submerging roads and destroying homes and businesses. The water may now have receded, but the destruction left in its wake will take far longer to repair. Toby Sadler has been to catch up with some of those affected.
Sly Augustin should be serving rum cocktails in his basement bar right now. But a month on from the floods, he's still bringing in equipment to try and dry the place out.
There was a river coming around the side of the bar. I came down and the water was, at that point, it was about maybe 3.5 steps up. So it had submerged all of the tables and chairs were now floating. But water was coming up, obviously, through all of the drainage, but it was also coming down through the ceiling, which was something to behold.
The people of Notting Hill have helped. A GoFundMe campaign has raised nearly £50,000, including one anonymous donation of £25,000. But Sly's adamant the damage could have been avoided.
It was 100% the main drains just cannot handle it. They were not serviced regularly enough. Now I've seen Thames Water have been by a number of times subsequently, and they've done a thorough inspection and cleaning of some of these drains. And now they work. They're still not great.
Down the road, this was the basement of Lucian's and Rubenstein bookshop in Notting Hill a month ago. Again, it's still a no-go zone.
So we're currently on our second set of kind of industrial strength dehumidifiers. I think after the flood, the humidity was 75% down here, which is not good. We need it to be about 30, but it's still, after 4 weeks, is far too humid for us to actually put any stock down here and not risk it being damaged. We've got all these boxes of books here which were either really badly damaged in the flood or got really damp in the aftermath. So we're kind of waiting to donate those. You can see, the floor's been completely ripped up.
The damage will have a long-term impact on the business.
August is normally a time when you do the returns, you clear the shelves, you do a stock take, you dust, you clean, and you get ready for Christmas, which is obviously the big event in the retail year, whether it's clothes, books, whatever. And at the moment, I just sort of don't want it to come.
Homes were also flooded. This was Brentford. The water's gone, but the cause of the floods remains.
Thames Water have a lot to think about because the drains and the sewers here are just not fit for purpose.
In a statement, Thames Water laid the blame for the floods on climate change, but conceded the drains couldn't cope with such a storm. It says it's launched an independent investigation to see if lessons can be learnt. Toby Sadler, ITV News.
The RSPCA is appealing for information after a female chow chow and her 3 puppies were found abandoned on Chobham Common in Surrey. The dogs were found by a member of the public who took them straight to a local vet's. Sport now, and it's the start of the Premier League season, and for Brentford, the start of a season they've waited a long time for.
For the love of the game. eBay sponsors ITV Regional Sports Reports.
Most fans of Brentford FC have no recollection of watching their team in top-flight football. The last time it happened was 3/4 of a century ago in 1947. But tonight, all that changes, and Antoine Allen is at the stadium for us now. Antoine, not long to go now.
Yes, the Premier League back with a new kid in town. 74 years these Brentford fans have been waiting. If you think about their journey to the Premier League like a 400-metre hurdles race, there's 10 hurdles in the race and Brentford have fallen 9 times, but on their 10th attempt, they made it across the biggest challenge in football to the promised land of the Premier League. But for their fans, it's not about all those lucrative deals and the big teams that will be coming here. It's about repaying the faith that they had in this team, not over a couple of years, but over decades. Now, Brentford are back in the Premier League. This is the moment Brentford fans had waited a lifetime to see. 9 times the Bees have been close to returning to top-flight English football. 9 times they had failed. 10 is now their lucky number. The road to Brentford Community Stadium has no yellow bricks, But for fans like Gary, the first Premier League game in their history feels like a dream.
I'm just praying that this isn't a dream and I'm not going to wake up and realise, you know, we're back in League Two again. But, you know, just so excited.
Tonight's home game against Arsenal will be Brentford's first chance to fill every seat in their brand new stadium. And what will the atmosphere be like tonight when you and the rest of the Bees finally see Brentford in the Premier League?
Well, so, you know, we've had months and months and months of waiting for this opportunity. Everybody is going to be really up for this game, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of noise in that stadium. Although it's only 70, it feels like 172,000. That's what it's going to feel like tonight when we kick off against Arsenal.
This evening, this bridge is going to be full of Bees fans making their way to their team's first Premier League game. Most of those fans weren't alive the last time Brentford were in the top flight, but for those fans that were, they've waited decades to see history be made. Brentford were relegated in 1947. Their last game in the First Division was against Arsenal. As a boy, Derek was there. He can remember when footballers had to ride public transport to get to the stadium.
So they were mixing with the supporters going down, and I used to after the match, I'd go and jump on one of the buses so I could get all the autographs.
When you make your way to your seat for Brentford against Arsenal, what will be going through your mind?
Well, I mean, we've been looking forward to this for a long, long time. You know, 74 years is quite a long wait, isn't it? We're all excited about it and confident that we will be staying in the division this year for sure.
Brentford manager Thomas Frank believes his team are in the Premier League to do more than just make up the numbers.
Part of it, I think we will surprise in the Premier League. I'm convinced about that. Maybe I'm wrong in a year's time. Nobody knows. But if you don't believe and you don't have that massive belief in your players and your team, I think it's very difficult to achieve anything.
No matter the result of tonight or for the rest of the season, fans will be collecting programmes knowing each game is a new chapter in Brentford's history.
And Antoine, this weekend is the start of the season for lots of London clubs.
Yes, across the country there'll be London clubs kicking off their season, each one of them trying to have a positive game. Of course, there's two London derbies, so at least one of the London clubs will be missing out on some points, but also the local businesses around stadiums will be thankful that football is back, full stadiums are back and fans are attending, which means that they can also make some money whilst we're cheering on football and enjoying the entertainment.
Wonderful to see. Antoine, thank you. Chelsea manager Thomas Tuchel said he was very happy to have Romelu Lukaku back in the club. The Blues take on Crystal Palace in their opening game of the season tomorrow afternoon. Record signing Lukaku could be in contention after joining from Inter Milan on Thursday for £97.5 million.
He has the power, he has the physique to help us. He has the experience, the personality to have huge impact into our squad. He is at the same time a humble guy and a team player, a true team player, and he cares about Chelsea. We had of course some exchange on the phone and exchange on with messages, but right now he's following the protocol and quarantining some more days, and then we will work on the details, and we're happy when he's with us on the pitch.
The ITV News continues at 6:30 with the latest on the mass shooting in Plymouth. Here's Lucrezia.
Tonight we'll be live in Plymouth, the scene of the first mass shooting in Britain in more than a decade. 5 people were killed in the space of a few terrifying minutes yesterday evening, one of them a 3-year-old girl. The gunman, Jake Davison, then turned the gun on himself. His motive tonight is still unknown. He was legally allowed to own a gun. Tonight we'll bring you everything we know from a city that is still in shock. Plus we'll have the rest of the day's news at 6:30.
Now, when the pandemic kept more people indoors, the purchases of puppies in the capital rose dramatically. But now the return to the office could present an unforeseen problem who will walk them. The City of London Corporation is planning to cap the number of licences for professional dog walkers at 40 and the number of dogs they can walk at once at 4.
This way, guys, this way.
Dog walking isn't just Alex Marchant's job.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
It is passion.
There's always one, isn't there?
But in a couple of months' time, he could be forced to stop.
There's a licensing scheme which is due to start in October, which is capped at 40 licences and only allows dog walkers to walk with 4 dogs.
The £300 licences will be required in Hampstead Heath, Queen's Park and Highgate Woods. 100 professional walkers, including Jonathan Brenner, currently use those areas.
Well, it puts my career going forwards in jeopardy because the licence, they're only giving 40 licences for 11,000 acres of space to indiscriminately whoever they choose. It doesn't take into account keeping a business running and keeping dogs and clients happy.
Alex says dogs like Marcel, Mochi, Maud and Luna here are the ones who could lose the most.
I see it as an animal welfare issue. You can't have a cap on licences. There's just too many dogs that need to be walked at the moment. With the puppy boom last year, vets saw a 200% increase in new dog registrations. As working from home comes to an end and people do return to the office, they're going to be looking for these services, and in October it's going to be extremely difficult to find a dog walker.
Nearly 5,000 people have now signed a petition against the plans, which were introduced after complaints dog walkers were a nuisance who've damaged the heath.
The City of London Corporation say they have worked closely with professional dog walkers in drawing up this licensing agreement, and the number of licences could be reviewed if in the future they can prove that the dog walking isn't having a negative impact on the wildlife on the heath and recreational users.
As licences come in October, the cost of walkies will inevitably go up. Martin Stew, ITV News.
On to the weather now, and it's good news for a warm and sunny weekend. Helen Plint's here now with the forecast.
Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV London weekend weather.
Hello again, a very good evening to you. Well, some cheerful summertime weather coming through this weekend. Things are mostly dry, we'll get some decent brightness. Still a fairly cloudy story in the afternoons though, but it's not until next week when things will feel noticeably cooler. There is something of a change in the short term though. We lose the high pressure, instead low pressure winging in from the west, and this is quite a messy sort of system. So you can see that first frontal system heading through on Saturday, mostly likely to just bring thicker cloud, but these showers will then trundle in for Sunday. Out there at the moment though, well, lovely late brightness for some of us taking us into the evening, and lengthy clear periods overnight tonight as well. This does allow for 1 or 2 pockets of low-lying mist or fog to develop potentially, but temperatures still doing pretty well, 13 to 15 degrees at their lowest in built-up spots. And actually for Saturday, well, what a glorious start to the weekend. Waterfall sunshine for a time, bright blue skies overhead, but notice as the day wears on, we'll start to see that influx of cloud in the afternoon. A little bit on the breezy side as well. This does at least keep things moving, so you can still see a couple of holes in that cloud, allowing for a bit of brightness. And our temperature's not doing badly, 22, 23 degrees. But you may just notice behind me a couple of showers, and again at any given point, because we're not far from those frontal systems, those could become a feature. Now moving forward for the second half of the weekend, any showers on Saturday evening quickly fizzling away. Again, we then got a clearer night. But for Sunday, we'll start to see more in the way of damper spells. Still few and far between though, well enough space that we do get some brightness. Temperatures doing well until the early portion of next week.
Great Western Railway sponsors the ITV London weekend weather.
Thanks, Helen. Finally, they're more often seen on farms in the countryside than parks in the city. But just for this week, rare breed sheep have been grazing in Green Park. They help improve the biodiversity and meadows and grasslands. It's a project run by the Rare Breeds Trust and Mudchute City Farm, supported by Prince Charles. And if you want to see them, they'll be there until Sunday. But we are done for now. We will be back with our late updates. Coming up next, it's the evening news with Lucrezia in Plymouth. But from all of us here on the London team, have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.